Good evening, everyone. By the clock, it's 6:30, so I'm calling the Champaign County Committee of the Whole to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Quisenberry? Here. Rector? Here. Rosales?
Here.
Schrader?
Here.
Schwartz? Shore? Weibel? Alex? Anderson? Berkson? Carter? Coert? Esri?
Here.
Harper? Harrison? Hartke?
Here.
Jay? Maxwell? McGuire? Michaels? Mitchell? Petrie?
Present. Thank you very much. Motion for the approval of the agenda and addenda, please.
So moved.
Mr. Rosales, a second. Mr. Maxwell, all right. Any changes or adjustments to the agenda and the addenda? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Next, motion for the approval of the minutes for the 12th of January, 2016. Mr. Shore. A second, please. Mr. Harper. Any corrections to the minutes? All right, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. And I don't see any public participation, nor do I have any slips for this evening, so I guess we do not have any communications. Mr. Jay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been brought to my attention that today is Astrid's birthday, and we'd like to wish her happy birthday. And if that wasn't enough, yesterday she celebrated her 56th wedding anniversary with Earl.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jay, for putting that on the permanent record for Ms. Bergson. That is outstanding. I want to remind everybody here and those watching that the Racial Justice Task Force is scheduled for their organization meeting this Thursday, 6:30 here in the Shields Room. And second, for those of you who could not attend the Robert's Rules of Order study session because of schedule conflicts, I have up here on the table the two handouts from Mr. Cheney. They were most helpful, and that the video is up on the county website for those who would like to take the time to watch it and share that information with any members of boards and commissions that you work with. And last but not least, Ms. Coert laid down the challenge for me that we need to be done at 7:45 because she needs to leave for the evening. So, so we're going to work toward that, Ms. Coert. All right, Ms. Berkson, you are up with Justice and Social Service, please.
And all there is if I can get a motion to accept these reports and put them on file.
All right, they are accepted and put on file for you.
Okay.
All right, you have no other business, no chair's report, nothing else. All right, Mr. Quisenberry, can you be that speedy this evening?
Hold on while I walk to the front. Good evening, everyone. For policy, personnel, and appointments, we're going to start out with the Local Foods Policy Council. In your packet, you had some information with regard to this. Let me tell you why. When we initiated this board, we did have in the ordinance that initiated it a timeline for review whether it needed to continue or not. I think we've been through one segment and then renewed it, and so that was 2 years ago. So the renewal of this will have to happen in March. But when we were looking at the policy agenda, One of the things I was hoping to have was someone from the Local Foods Policy Council to come give us a overview of what they've accomplished in the last year and what they feel is ahead of them to accomplish in the future if we renew them. But the timing was such that they couldn't get together and provide that information for tonight. So I went ahead and left it on the agenda because I wanted you to be aware of the timing of this and why we were talking about it. On the, I guess on the outside chance that this group is unanimous that we should continue this, we could probably do something about that. But I think it would probably be a good idea for us to invite them here at our March Cow and come prepared to act on renewal based on what we hear there. Hopefully we can get that maybe in writing. We should probably get some information in writing before we sit down and talk about that. But I would entertain any discussion or questions. Ms. Petrie, you were essential to getting this off the ground a few years ago. If you have any thoughts on how they're doing and where they need to go from your perspective, I would appreciate them.
Thank you very much. The group is coalescing to come before you. Actually, I had anticipated that they might be here this evening. Obviously, they are not, so I appreciate the extra time that you're giving them to come before the county board and talk about what they have done the past 2 years. And to mention again, there is a gentleman in the wings, as we say, who has been interviewed for an appointment to the Local Food Policy Council, but I'm awaiting the approval or not by the county board before I bring that appointment forward to you all, but I have done the interview.
So any thoughts or comments? Otherwise, this is just a discussion item and we can move on. I don't see any. So we're going to move on. Next on our agenda, we move to appointments. We have an appointment for the Dewey Community Public Water District for an unexpired term ending on May 31st, 2016. Madam Chair.
That is Josh Bird.
Do I have a second? Mr. Esri seconds. Ms. Petrie, would you like to speak to that appointment?
Thank you very much. I would indeed. The issue of the Dewey Water Board has been brought to the attention of the county board. In the past, they have had some rough moments in relationship to their board and filling vacancies. And this appointment with Josh Bird will help that along. The other two candidates are very fine candidates, and I'm anticipating several more vacancies on that board, and we will have these two candidates to consider. The reason for choosing Josh is he is a member of that water system as a citizen of Dewey, and he brought the issue to my attention probably a good year ago, and when he did that, he provided me with a lot of the documentation that gave me a chance to read about the issues there. So I was better informed, and last October, I believe Mr. Maxwell can correct me, Mr. Maxwell and I went to one of those board meetings so we could see exactly what was going on. The Dewey is within the County Board District of Mr. Maxwell and Mr. Jay, and that was the reason Mr. Maxwell went with me to that meeting. So I would, of course, appreciate your advice and consent for my recommendation.
All right, any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. Next up, we have a recommendation from the sheriff for the Deputy Sheriff Merit Commission of an unexpired term ending November 30th, 2017, and that is Oliver J. Clark. I'd entertain a motion. Mr. Esri moves. Mr. Rector seconds. Any questions or discussion? I'll remind the board that this is the sheriff's recommendation to make, not the chair's. So we can either pass it or we can ask him to try again. Any comments? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. That also passes unanimously. You should have a report in your packet from the county clerk for January 2016. I would accept that and place that on file. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, we will accept it and place it on file, and we will move on to Section D, County Administrator. You also have the Administrative Services Monthly Report for January 2016. Another report that I will accept and place on file. Is there any questions or concerns for Ms. Busey? Mr. Anderson?
I have one question on page 20. It references workers' compensation reports. And am I reading it correctly that in January of this year, we had 21 reports as opposed to 5 the same time last year? And is there a reason for that?
Yes, there were 21 in January. However, 10 of them had a date of loss in January. The other 11 were from previous months and did not get filed until January.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Okay, moving right along, we also have in the packet an ADA settlement agreement compliance update, which was provided for your viewing pleasure. And I would ask Tammy to join us for a moment to give us the highlights of that. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening. You have a copy of the 6-month report that was submitted to the Department of Justice in January. The county continues to meet the compliance deadlines that were established by the settlement agreement, and some of the highlights over the last 6 months include implementation of the county's Serving People with Disabilities handbook. This was a handbook that was written by Administrative Services and can be used for county staff as a tool to help meet the compliance requirements. Additionally, we conducted extensive training in January. There were 2 counter-staff sessions and 1 supervisory session that was conducted by the Great Lakes ADA Center. Robin Jones was the individual who presented those training sessions, and they are available for viewing. If anyone is interested, just let me know, and we can facilitate that. They were recorded sessions. What you don't see as part of this written report is a substantial amount of documentation that was submitted to the Department of Justice by the architect Bailey Edward, and it indicated the compliance requirements for facilities and county buildings. Our next compliance deadline will be in July, and in preparation for that, we will mostly be focusing on ensuring that our online services and websites meet the ADA requirements, and also that continue to work on the building and facilities standards that were set by the settlement agreement. Are there any questions?
Yes, anybody have questions? Thank you very much for that update, and thanks for the good work. Oh, sorry, Patsy.
James did thank you, but I do want to thank you for all the effort to arrange those 2 training sessions. I know that took a lot of coordination to accomplish that.
All right. And we will accept this report and place it on file as well. Next, we have a couple of items coming back from job content evaluation. And we have someone here to speak to the master control officer change. First, I would like a motion to accept that recommendation from the Job Content Evaluation Committee. Mr. Alex moves, and a second by Ms. Berkson. Are there questions regarding this situation? Please join us. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Alex.
if I could mention, we do have as usual with things that come back from the Job Content Evaluation Committee, we've got a parallel item for each of these under the Finance Committee agenda. So if you have questions about the economic impact of this or impact on the budget, it might make sense to ask Captain Voges this while she's here so that we can hopefully get a consistent vote between this committee and the Finance Committee.
Yeah, and I'll summarize briefly for the viewing public that this was recommended to be upgraded two steps from D to F, and so that will have some impact. Are there any questions? Yes,
I'd like
Jim.
to start with an overall question first. Who's on the Job Content Committee, and how did they decide to move it up by steps?
The Job Content Evaluation Committee is defined in the personnel policy by position. It is intended to be made up of mid-management positions, wherein any position in the county government that would be evaluated by this committee, there's an individual on the committee who has familiarity with the operations of that office. So it's all defined by your policies. The people who are on it right now, I hope I get them all, but it includes the county administrator, the deputy county administrator of finance. It includes the director of probation. It includes the chief deputy treasurer, the assistant state's attorney who weighs in on FLSA status and exemptions, the senior engineer from the highway department, and I knew I'd forget someone, and the chief deputy sheriff. And the system is a defined system that the county did an RFP back in the year 2000, and through a competitive process, selected a classification review and analysis system. Employers Association is who we ended up contracting with, and we used the system that was defined by that organization for the classification of our positions. It includes a questionnaire regarding each position, looking at job descriptions, and then assigning points based on the relevant information about the job.
Okay, yes, Mr. Harper.
I guess this is for Captain Voges. As part of this, I think I read where it hadn't been updated for like 11 years. And are you having trouble filling those positions? Is this hope to attract better quality candidates?
That's correct. Actually, that's part of it's not been updated for quite some time. I was the prime candidate to be in that position because I started in that position. But with that being said, I'm having a very, very hard time filling the positions. My turnover rate has been at a large rate. Actually, when I went to the Job Analysis Committee, I was able to have my numbers to show the amount. I'm having people come in and shadow the job, and they're coming back telling me, I don't want this position at this pay. The requirements and what you expect from me is much more. So we also are filling it, unfortunately, because I can't fill it with officers and overtime, which in turn is increasing my money that I'm paying out. So.
Other questions? Mr. Maxwell.
Thank you. I think you maybe helped me a little bit. It appears that upgrading these positions, there's 13 people involved, would cost about $44,000 annually the first year in increased salaries plus benefits. One question is that we'll get back to, but how many of these people are now up to the top pay grade already that we'd be looking at?
I currently have not been able to staff it. So the most, I think right now, the most senior master controller I have is maybe 5 years. I've been unable to staff it. Usually they leave within 6 months or so.
The other question, I'm sorry, the other question.
Ms. Busey has a comment on that.
Sorry.
With only one or two exceptions, actually, every employee in the group will be going to the new minimum because that's the greater increase. The contract requires that when there's a promotion, you go to the new salary range minimum or receive 10%, whichever is greater, but they will all be going to the new minimum.
Go ahead, Mr. Maxwell, with your other question.
Thank you. The other question I have is you did allude to the fact that you're having to fill these positions now with other staff. Would the savings in not placing those folks in there offset somewhat this $44,000?
I believe by filling them, you're going to see to me, an increase. The amount of money I'm spending on officer is $10 an hour more plus by the officers filling it and the overtime that's being worked at this point, if that makes sense. Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Okay, other questions? Lorraine, please.
With these people going to the new minimum, will their job description change?
Actually, their job description has changed from the last one. It's recently changed. That was one of my concerns, is that their job description has changed immensely over the last 5 years. This is the same position. I just want to, I guess, put in your mind what position this is. Many of you did a tour with me during the discussions with the jail expansion. And this is the position right in the very middle that every time I walk through with you guys, you're like, only one person does this job. This is that job. And unfortunately, we have expanded what we're requiring of them, and we've kept that pay there. And they're my eyes and ears. They keep me safe. So if that helps at all.
Okay, Mr. Alex.
And there's one person essentially in that position at all times at both jails, is that correct?
That's correct. It's 24 hours, and there's a total of 12 we have filling it that we would like to have filled.
And in both jails are 365, 24/7?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any more questions, so thank you for your answers. At this point, we have a motion and a second, so I will ask for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. Next, we have a recommendation back regarding the GIS specialist, which was a change basically in title. The GIS, the existing, sorry, I missed the original title there. The original GIS technician, they had one job that they wanted reclassified to the specialist position. The committee reviewed it, and while there's a change, there was not a change in the grade. So there is no impact on minimums, maximums, midpoints, and things like that. So I need a motion to accept this recommendation from Mr. Weibel, and then I need a second by Mr. Shore. Any discussions or questions with regard to this? Mr. Alex.
Yeah, I had originally thought that there was no change in classification, but I did notice that there was discussion of a market adjustment. Can you explain how that works?
We have automatically applied that to our technology positions for the past 5 or 6 years, and so we would continue doing that application for equity.
But that applied to the previous position as well?
It applies both to the technician and the
Okay,
specialist.
so in effect, this is adding a new job, adding a new position called GIS specialist, but it is going to be filled by somebody who was in the position of GIS technician?
Correct.
And will there continue to be anyone in a GIS technician position?
There is, and there will continue to be.
So we're
There were
going from 2 technicians to 1 technician and 1 specialist?
Right.
Same money?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Yes, Mr. Maxwell.
I wonder if the county administrator could, and kind of refresh my memory as to how these positions are funded through the consortium.
Well, the consortium is a joint venture, which is entirely funded by member contributions. The county's contribution comes from the GIS fee that the county collects through the recorder's office.
All right, any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Okay, that passes unanimously. Moving right along, is there any other business for policy, personnel, and appointments that people would like to bring? Oh, sorry, there is an addenda. I missed that. Yes, we have a resolution calling for an equitable solution to issues related to increased juror compensation. Can I have a motion for that resolution? Moved by Mr. Harper, seconded by Mr. Anderson. And I would ask Ms. Petrie, could you speak a little bit to this?
Yes, I can, and thank you very much. This is a model resolution that I brought back to the county board from the meeting of UCCI now 10 days ago. And the purpose of it is the following, and just a reminder that UCCI has been working on this issue of the legislation that increased the amount to be paid to jurors and decrease the size of juries. And that went into effect the 1st of July, and Ms. Busey calculated the cost of the county. Was that about potentially 80,000 or?
That was for half a year. We increased this year's budget by $162,000.
Okay. Thank you very much for that correction. And UCCI is still in the throes of working on getting this legislation changed so that there isn't this unfunded mandate laying over all of the municipalities and counties that it comes out of their budgets to pay for the juries. And they ask the various counties that are member of UCCI to bring this back to their county boards to ask if they would be willing to pass a resolution, which in turn then will be collected and aggregated and used as a lobby the legislature to change the legislation that was passed.
All right, do I have any questions or comments? Mr. Rosales?
So the number will be reduced from 12 to 8?
The number has been reduced from 12 to 6. The amount of fee to be paid is $25 the first day and then up to $50. And if you as a client would like a full jury, members of 12, then it comes out of the client's pocket for juror 7 through 12.
All right, Mr. Alex?
All right.
And to clarify, I believe that is for civil juries only. Criminal juries, you're still entitled to 12,
that's
although
correct.
you have the option of, a defendant now has the option of choosing 6 if they prefer.
Right. But the main issue, as we all know, is the issue of the unfunded mandate. And just another reminder to you all, late last fall, UCCI was collecting data from all of the member counties as to the calculation cost to individual counties' budgets on unfunded mandates that are passed by the legislature, and Ms. Busey did do that calculation for this county, which we in turn sent to UCCI as data for them.
All right, thank you. Mr. J, did I see your hand up earlier? Okay, good. All right, seeing no other commentaries or questions, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. No. That motion passes, but not unanimously. Any other business for tonight? Seeing none, I'll move on to the chair's report. I am happy to bring some news from the search committee for the county administrator. We have phone interviewed 7 candidates over the last 2 days, and we are at a point where we have 3 candidates that we will be able to start moving forward with as long as we get through some notification timing with them. We're not ready to release those names yet. But I would like, the committee has gone over some options with regard to how the search process will proceed from now, and I'm going to let Ms. Busey go over what the plan looks like.
So we will bring the 3 finalist candidates here on February 24th. That's a Wednesday. And that Wednesday afternoon, starting at 2 o'clock, in 15-minute blocks, we will make the 3 candidates available to you for individual meetings with the candidates. We will have a sign-up sheet at the board meeting next week if you want to come in and meet individually with those candidates. However, individually, we're limiting it to, it may be up to 2, depending on how many of you decide to take advantage of this opportunity. If you were going to do it in twos, we might encourage you to do it by districts. But basically, hopefully, we'll be able to structure it so that it can be a 45 to 60-minute venture on your parts to have 15 minutes to sit down with each of the candidates. Then that evening at 6:30, we will have a public reception for you, the county board, and members of the public to, again, come in and have the opportunity to just informally meet with and talk with the 3 candidates. Then on February 25th, we will be interviewing the candidates. There will be 4 scheduled interviews for each of the candidates. One will be with representatives from our partner organizations. So that will be the city manager, the representatives from the cities, the villages, the MTD, the public health district, the Board of Health, or the nursing home board will be one group. Another group will be staff department leaders, so department heads within the county, sitting down and meeting with each of the candidates. And one will be a lunch meeting for each of the candidates with representatives, with one of our elected officials and one representative from the communities such as Convention and Visitors Bureau or the EDC. And the purpose of that interview will be to allow the candidates to ask questions and be provided with information about the community. And then the last interview for each candidate will be with the search committee.
All right, and if you have questions, so it's important in this process that each of you have an opportunity to have some time with the candidates. That's why we're going with this individual meeting opportunity. The public reception is an important opportunity for community stakeholders to come and have a chance to meet with these candidates, so the broader community can have a chance to see them. We intend to have, for those meetings and for the stakeholder, or the community partner and the staff groups, a standard, fairly short evaluation kind of form for you to be able to provide your feedback in on the candidates that you speak with. And then the goal would be to take all of that input from those various venues and from you and from the search committee, and then hopefully move towards a recommendation after we have all that input. I can tell you from where I sit as the chair of the search and with a lot of experience in doing searches on campus, we had a very good, strong pool, and I'm really happy with the 3 candidates that the committee came to today. Do you have any questions about that process or how we're going about it? I do hope that, and now I will say that there is a caveat that the scheduling for this has not happened. There's a lot of moving parts with this. I may need your flexibility in case something doesn't go through the way we hope it does, but the intent is to give all of you a chance to meet with every candidate, get community input, get some key constituent groups input, and then move forward. Yes, Max.
If one of the candidates opts out, do you have a 4th?
At this point, the committee is moving forward with 3 candidates. It's certainly possible that someone would opt out, but at this point, all 3 candidates that we're moving forward with seemed really committed, and we don't anticipate that. We'll cross that bridge if we get to it. Mr. Alex.
I guess I would just add to that my interpretation, which is that I think the short answer to your question is yes, we do have additional candidates who we would certainly go to if we were unable to either find one of the finalists who we liked or were unable to come to terms.
Thank you, Mr. Alex. Ms. Petrie.
Offering these opportunities for all of you to get a chance to chat with these candidates. As James said, we encourage you to take advantage of it, but in turn then to share back to the committee members your impressions, your thoughts on the candidates so we can fold this into our conversations.
All right. If there's no other questions or comments, I think that does it for policy. And I think we only have the two items from B1 and B2 to go on consent, because job content does not. So I am done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quisenberry. Mr. Alex.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First item on the finance agenda is the treasurer's report. Mr. Welch indicated he could not be here this evening, so unless there are comments, I will take that report and place it on file. We will go ahead and do that. We will move on to the auditor. We have the auditor's monthly report. It was posted on the website and made available. We will receive that and place it on file. We also have a quarterly financial report. And the auditor has audited, by way of transition audits, the Office of the Supervisor of Assessments and the Office of the Board of Review to ensure that those offices were in good shape as those transitions occurred. Mr. Farney, anything to share with us?
Thank you, sir. The transition audits, that's something that we're going to do anytime a department head leaves, whether they're leaving because they chose to leave or other circumstances arise. We think it's just a good practice to follow, so that's something that we have started doing. I hope we continue to have very boring transition audit reports as these were today. I'm not looking forward to someday when the sheriff leaves and we have to go and inventory every car.
So can you give us an idea what it is that you look for in these transition audits?
Sure. The main things we look for are the first thing we look for is, do you want me to, or? Oh, okay.
Do you want to ask now? Sure. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask, you implied the answer to my question, but when there is a transition in elected officials, is your intent
that as well.
to do that as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. What we looked for was the first thing we look at is any cash that may come across in those offices. So if they have actual, like the county clerk's office where they have transactions, we would look at those transactions, review receipts, make sure things of those nature all add up. We also would be looking at the fixed assets of any office, and we keep a running fixed asset ledger of anything that's over $5,000 in value. That's kept by my office. The county administrator's office also keeps the capital asset replacement fund. Those items might not necessarily be over $5,000, but they are some of the bigger ticket or easily to walk off with items, laptops, tablets, cameras, things like that. So we'll also check against those and make sure those items are accounted for as well. In the case of these two offices that we looked at in this time, it was mostly software licensing was on their books, so that's kind of hard to walk off with. We also talked to the employees in the office and make sure that they didn't see anything out of the ordinary disappear, which we talked to each one of them. There was no problems with that as well.
Thank you. Any questions, Ms. Petrie?
Well, it isn't a question, it's a thank you for putting another check and balance in place, because John Farney and Dan Welch and I sat down and did a debriefing. If there were sufficient checks and balances in place after we had the issue in the assessor's office, and it seems that they're very satisfied with that aspect, and now you've added another layer, so thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Ms. Petrie. Any other comments or questions for the auditor? Ms. Bergson?
Great idea. I think it should have been done before.
Thank you, Ms. Bergson. Anybody else for the auditor? If not, we will receive all those reports and place them on file. Thank you, sir. We will move on to the nursing home. The nursing home monthly financial report, because of the timing of the month, was prepared just in time for the nursing home board meeting last night, so it didn't have time to make the packet. It is included in the sort of mini packet here with the yellow sheet. I will accept and place that on file. This is an opportunity for any questions or comments with regard to the nursing home, and specifically the finances thereof. Seeing no further discussion, we will place that on file and move on. Our first budget amendment and transfers, item D1. This will be a cleanup item for the fiscal year 15 budget. This is allocating $225, the state's attorney's budget, transfer of funds for end-of-year salary obligations. May I have a motion to send this to the full board with a recommendation for approval? Mr. Anderson, may I have a second? Mr. Jay, any discussion, comments, or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Move on to item D2. This is a budget amendment 15-74. $2 from the fund balance for the Victims Advocacy Grant from the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. Increase in appropriations for the end-of-year salary match for the grant. May I have a motion to send this to the full board with a recommendation for approval? Mr. Anderson again, second. Mr. Jay again. Anybody want to talk about $2? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to Budget Amendment 15-75. Increased appropriations of $200 from the fund balance of the state's attorney's office to cover an invoice from an expert witness in a felony case. May I have a motion to send this to the full board? Mr. Anderson again. Let's go somebody different, Mr. Shore this time. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. And move on to the fiscal year 16 items now. We have Budget Amendment 16-6, increased appropriations of $12,605 from the fund balance. This is moving money which was allocated for website design in 2015 forward into 2016. I may have a motion to send this to the full board with a recommendation for approval. Mr. Schrader and Ms. Bergson. Any discussion or questions? Ms. Busey can speak to this if we have any questions about this. Looks like not. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries, and we'll move to the addendum. We have Budget Amendment 16-7, increased revenue of $22,673, increased appropriations of $38,800. This is to cover portions of the local government shared expenses associated with the 2 countywide residential electronics collections in 2016. Something we do every year. Could I get a motion? Mr. Esri, and seconded by Mr. Weibel. Any discussion or questions about this? Ms. Petrie.
Yes, I mentioned this at ELOC, and I see Susan's in the room, so I want to mention it again. I hope this is well monitored, so we might be able to decrease this amount, and the fact that we will not need 2 collections per year and just 1. Thanks.
Susan, feel free to come up and speak to this if you want. You don't have to, if you have anything to add. You sat back there all this time, you might as well speak.
My goal would be to have no collections. So to have options available conveniently and a well-run and functional manufacturer's take-back program.
But that we're still not there yet, right? Ms. Michaels.
My question was, does she have a date on some of these, or at least a month range?
Susan?
So we can get that out. Apologize.
The tentative dates pending approval of contracts and cost share agreements are May 21st and October 15th.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Anybody have anything else on this? Mr. Jay?
I would just like to tell Susan, thanks. We've used those facilities a time or two, and it's, there's just not a lot of places you can go, so we appreciate your efforts.
Yeah, this is one of these, if I understand it right, this is sort of one of these, we had an issue with the state, right, where they essentially made it illegal for recyclers to charge money to take televisions and things like that, and I guess in an attempt to protect the consumer, and as a result, nobody takes them anymore. So one of these, issues that maybe someday we'll be able to get the legislature to solve.
Susan might want to speak to the change of policy at Best Buy, which is another trigger on this.
I would like to keep the board informed about legislative efforts to fix the program, so you may hear about this some more.
Thank you.
Well, the policy change at Best Buy is now they no longer take any size of TV and computer, and that's why she really asked for doing it twice a year, because people are bringing to her attention, John Hall's attention, that they're being thrown in the rural ditches. Am I presenting that correctly, Susan?
You are correct. There are absolutely no options convenient to residents to recycle their televisions or cathode ray tube monitors.
Yeah, and I
As
would
of-
argue
as of
it's,
February 1st.
I would argue it may be a little unfair to call out Best Buy, because as I understand, nobody else takes them either, so.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else on this? I saw a bunch of comments. Mr. Weibel?
Best Buy will recycle your TV if you buy a big TV from them. It has to be a big one, like 40 inches or greater.
Thank you for that clarification. Anybody else on electronics recycling? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Susan. Okay, we'll move on to the county administrator section of the report. We have a fiscal year 2015 general corporate fund budget projection and general corporate fund budget change report, also in the yellow packet. Deb?
Well, this is for the end of January. There's only one more month that will still get posted to fiscal 2015, but I think at this point we can be fairly certain that this report will very closely reflect where we end up. A couple things on the revenue side that I would point out. First of all, that highlighted state salary reimbursement, where it shows year-to-date as of January 31st at $151,317. This was the last piece of state money that we had not been receiving, and in the last 2 days, we received it. So it will actually be $307,203. They did provide the salary reimbursements for state's attorney, supervisor of assessments, and public defender. So that was good news just in the last couple days. Overall, I would just point out to you with state shared revenues that the 1 cent sales tax, as we've been saying all year, and these numbers are final because the February numbers are included in the projection. So the 1 cent is down 15.3% over where it was for fiscal 14. That's a total of $203,036. The quarter cent is down 0.57% for the year, which is $31,358, and that is very definitely attributable to the decline in the unincorporated areas. I would say without that decline in the unincorporated, the sales tax would have been flat or slightly increased over where it was last year. And then interestingly enough, the income tax is up 11.11%, up $343,189. Overall, the total revenues are projected to come in at right about 98% of budget. And considering we were pretty accurate earlier this year, we started predicting that the general fees were going to be $300,000 less than was budgeted, and it looks like that's just about where they're going to land. And fortunately, the 2016 budget is based on the $4 million, not the $4.3 million, so we've corrected that in the budget. On the expenditure side, looks like we will spend just under 97% of the entire budget. Basically, at this point, underspending in every area, but that's because you've amended the budget so that we're underspending in every area. But the summary shows that we should end up with a revenue positive year for fiscal 15 of about $650,000, which is very good, I think, in light of some of the challenges that we had with the fiscal 15 budget. The ending fund balance is then at 13.3%, but that's the beginning fund balance for fiscal 16. And if you look at it against the 16 budget, we're almost at a 14% fund balance, which is a good position, the best position we've been in a couple of years. And one reason that you don't have before you this evening, at least, a resolution for a loan from public safety sales tax to the general corporate fund. You will probably see one just for the sake of being safe, but right now the cash flow, according to the treasurer, looks like we may make it to collection of property taxes with the general corporate fund, which is also very good news.
Thanks, Deb. That is good news. And I would note this might get a little bit better because we still have some more revenue to book for fiscal year 2015.
It's pretty much projected.
Okay, we think,
I've
you've
projected
already
most
projected
of where
it.
I think the
Okay.
revenue will be. Yeah.
Well, that's great. No, it's a terrific outcome, all things considered. and we may end up having to use that to survive some upcoming challenges, depending on what happens with the state. So I
Yeah.
think it's important that we maintain a strong fund balance.
Yes.
Any discussion or questions about the county administrator's reports? Seeing none, we'll accept those and place them on file. Next item is the recommendation for elected official salaries. This was deferred from January 12, 2016, and to give a brief recap of how we got here and where we are, the county administrator made an original recommendation of 2% increases for the next 4 years for the elected officials who are being elected in November, with the exception of the county board members, who we do every 10 years. An amendment was made by Mr. Harkey to reduce these salaries by 11% across the board, with freezes thereafter. That motion was discussed and voted on and did not pass. A second amendment was made by Mr. Quisenberry to reduce the salary of the recorder by 11% and freeze the, and thereafter freeze the salaries of those officials. So the recorder would be down by 11%, the others would stay status quo with no raises for 4 years. And that is the amendment that had been discussed and was on the floor when Mr. Maxwell made a motion to defer. The motion to defer was successful, so here we are. So we will reopen the floor for discussion on the current amendment, which is an 11% cut for the recorder and otherwise 0% increases across the board for the officials at hand. And I guess for the sake of completeness, those officials are the county clerk. We have the list of, make sure I get it right. County clerk, no, sorry. There you go, circuit clerk, the auditor, the coroner, the recorder, and the county board chair. So would anyone like to speak to the amendment? Mr. Quisenberry.
Since I made the amendment, I figure I should reiterate my, my logic here. My logic is because of the recommendation of the duties associated with the recorder's office and how they compare with other offices, I encouraged us to reduce that salary to be similar to comparable job duties based on that evaluation. And because of the uncertainty this year and in future years with regard to the state's finances and what's going on there, I included a recommendation in that amendment that we hold salaries at no increase for that 4-year time period.
Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry. Anybody else? Ms. Bergson.
Microphone.
While we're at it, why don't we just skip the coroner and save it all? Put it all in the county clerk's office. It's worked well with other.
Recorder, you mean?
Put the recorder into the county clerk's office because it's worked well for other counties, I guess, rather a lot of them.
Thank you, Ms. Bergson. Any other discussion? I guess, Mr. Quisenberry again.
I would like to point out that the opportunity to place that on the ballot was put before this body in the summer last year, and the vote was 3 to a lot to not do it. And so, and at that time, that was probably the last opportunity to do it before the election process really got underway. And so we can't choose to do that. We would have to choose to again go through the process of putting it on the ballot. I see no indication, that would be a policy thing. I see no indication that much more than 3 are still in favor of that. The people I've heard from were either in that 3 or maybe another 1 or 2. So I don't think that's a viable approach.
Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry. Mr. McGuire.
Just to make a comment on the issue, because I think there's a lot of information out there that's maybe a little incorrect. There are a lot of counties that have them combined, but they're much smaller counties and don't meet the criteria. The top 20 counties that have more than 100,000.
Mr. Chair, this is out of order.
I just want to make the statement because it's out there. The top 20 counties that have over 100,000 people in the county, only McLean County has combined them in the last few years. And the largest population center, which is Bloomington, has its own election commission. So it's not apples and oranges. And the only other comment I'd make is Jim Dice's article about the person who took over the driveway and what kind of issue that's been for 12 years because of a document that was misdocumented in the recorder's office. So if we want to provide good service, because it goes to what we're talking about now, which is the wages for the recorder's office, and good service for the public, we need to make sure we make good decisions about what happens to these offices. I guess one question I'd have about the recorder's office, compression is always an issue with wages in these offices, and I'd like to know of the employees or people that work in the staff in the recorder's office, what's the highest paid employee in the staff in the office? As Ms. Busey pointed out with the FOIA report, that there's a lot of people that make more money than some of the elected officials.
Thanks, Deb. Jim, those are a matter of public record, so Deb, you can certainly probably let us know what the salary of the Chief Deputy Recorder is.
The Chief Deputy Recorder's salary currently is right about 40,000. I don't know the number exactly, but that's right about where it is.
Thanks, Deb. Any other, and Mr. Weibel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe the last time I talked about this, somebody commented that they felt that they could not live on these salaries. I want to point out that I worked for the State Geological Survey for almost 30 years. All of these people make more than I ever made. I also want to point out that I was an at-will employee. I was not tenured. My position required a bachelor's degree plus graduate degrees with special education. I believe that all of these require you live in Champaign County and you be registered to vote. You don't even have to have a high school degree. Is that right, Mr.?
I'm not sure if you need to be registered to vote.
Well, I would hope you would be anyway. That'd be a plus, and if you're not. Now, granted, they have to run for the election every 4 years, so there's some extra effort with that. But on the other hand, I mean, it's only every 4 years. These people make enough money to have a nice house and live well in Champaign County. I wish I had their salaries before I retired. So I will vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weibel. Any other comments or discussion? Mr. Hartke.
Yeah, I'm going to vote no, and I want to make it clear why. That I really hesitate for us to get in a position where we're basically trying to put elected officials before job evaluation committees to determine their salaries. I think that we set these salaries, and then it's up to the people to determine whether they do their jobs right to earn those salaries. I also kind of have a problem with creating a third level. We currently have 2 tiers of countywide elected officials. I'd hesitate to make this a third, and I think we're saving nickels and dimes here, and the problem is that we're going to create more. We're going to basically create another layer, a third tier of government official that we're going to have to adjust every few years, and I don't see that being a good idea. It's up to the people to elect these folks, not for us to determine whether they're doing their job.
Anybody else? Mr. McGuire, and then Mr. Shore.
I would like to go back to salary. Setting the salaries as I've understood them and bargaining and everything else is based more on the job position and the comparisons like Ms. Busey's provided from other counties, not necessarily how much somebody makes or how much we think they should make, but their duties and responsibilities and experience. And that's what we have, is what they're making currently from other counties.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Mr. Shore, and then Mr. Anderson.
Well, I found what Mr. Quisenberry said earlier compelling about the different levels of the duties of the offices. What I didn't find compelling was at the last meeting, a number of people brought up the seniority or how long certain individuals had been on the job. And I think one thing that everybody should keep in mind as we are considering this vote is that There's a reason for the timing of making these salaries, and we should be considering the duties of the office rather than the individuals within them.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Mr. Anderson.
Yes, briefly, I think it's clear that the county board's responsibility is for the overall budget of the county. And as it was already said by Mr. McGuire, we do comparatives. We try to establish what we consider to be a fair market salary so that we can at least get candidates of good credential to apply for these positions. And then, of course, it goes through the election process. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Maxwell.
Probably it's been said already. I think maybe it has, but we set these salaries according to the job, not the person. So I think that we probably ought to leave the recorder's salary alone. And if that person is, whoever assumes that office doesn't get the job done, it'll be up to the electors to take care of it 4 years hence. So I think in terms of what we're doing about this evening, I would be inclined to leave the recorder's salary at whatever it is now and not cut it. But it has a certain level of duties, and the new recorder must perform those duties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Anybody else? Ms. Petrie, I see you reaching for the microphone. Do you want to speak?
I do. I haven't quite decided how I feel about what's been proposed, but I do want to lay something out on the table that we can be thinking about as we do any of these salaries. And we have these comparisons here, but the comparisons are also used by our fellow like-kind counties, so it becomes a feeding frenzy of an upward spiral. And I'm beginning to hear from some constituents about the argument that, well, we're at the lowest level on this one and maybe in the middle here and middle there. And somebody said to me, well, what's wrong with being down on the lower end? Why do we always have to use the argument that we have to be up on the upper end? Because then the other 5 counties will look at that and say, oh, look, Champaign's up, and it just becomes a spiral. And we are having terrific budget problems. They probably won't cure themselves for 2 to 3 years, and this is something that we have to keep in mind throughout all of our salary decisions. And the other aspect that feeds into this is we get salary decisions in very siloed increments. We're looking at elected officials now. We get some recommendations from union negotiations, and then we do this and we do that. And we really need to be keeping this whole picture in mind as we move forward in relationship to our present budget and what we foresee to be our possible budgets in 2017 and 2018.
Thank you, Ms. Petrie. I think Ms. Harrison was next.
So I guess first I have a question. I didn't know if, from Mr. Maxwell's comments, if you're looking for a motion to amend the amendment?
No, I'm not at the present time.
Okay.
Is it possible to amend an amendment?
It is. You can make it super, so you can amend the amendment. I would like to see if there's anybody else who wants to speak to the current one, though, if you do me the courtesy. Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes, I would ask that we let this amendment pass or fail on its own merits, and then if somebody has another plan, propose another amendment rather than stacking amendments.
Okay.
Would certainly be easier.
So
Ms.
I guess,
Harrison?
I'm more compelled to want to treat all the elected offices the same, just because they all are chosen by the voters of Champaign County to be in those positions. I also am comfortable with elected officials, looking at FOIA requests. There might be people within those offices who make more than the elected official, but that happens at all levels of government and even all levels of different management. So, we have county officials making more than our state rep and state senator. So, I mean, you can kind of go down that line, but that's pretty irrelevant to the conversation. Your authority for that office comes from the voters. It doesn't come from your salary. So I think that's just something to keep in mind, that the monetary benefits isn't what gives you the authority to run your office. It's the voters who think that you're going to do the best job for Champaign County within the respective department that you've been elected. And then the other thing is, I do think we should really keep in the back of our minds that the stipends we receive for salaries could be questionable, especially as the state is putting together their FY17 budget. We don't know what their status will be.
Thanks, Ms. Harrison. And just to clarify, any county employee with compensation over $75,000 that doesn't need to be FOIA'd, those are all listed on the website by state requirement. Anybody else to speak to this? Mr. Anderson, and then Mr. Harper.
Not to speak to it, only to ask that you reread the actual amendment so I'm clear on it before a vote comes up.
Okay. Do you want to read that back, or do you want me to try? I mean, I think everybody correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is an 11% cut to the recorder's salary from what they're making now, and 0% raises then for the recorder and for these other positions that are elected in November for 4 years. Mr. Quisenberry says that's what he meant. Is that acceptable, or do you need more detail? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, who did I say was next? Mr. Harper was next, then Mr. Mitchell, sorry, was it Mr. Max or John? Mr. Mitchell, and then Mr. McGuire.
Being fiscally responsible, I agree with the 0% raises. You know, it's just the way things are right now. I mean, I was on that committee when 2 years ago we gave the 2% to the other 4 elected officials. But why, and nobody's explained to me, why did we pick out the recorder for an 11% cut? I mean, I kind of agree with Mr. Maxwell. If we're going to go 0%, let's go 0% across the board. If anybody can answer that for me. I mean, I know there's going to be a brand new recorder, if that's the reason, but.
Mr. Quisenberry, do you want to speak to that real briefly?
Yeah,
before I go to these
that
guys?
number came from the actual recommendation. It was, I think, a B or C item in the original recommendation that compared the scope of the office with that of the supervisor of assessments and the department head for planning and zoning, as far as the number of reports and the scope of the work done in the office. And so using those salaries, a salary was come up with that's in the midpoint of those, I believe, and that represented an 11% cut. Not specific. Didn't come from a 11% cut. It came from where that came out from that analysis.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Just call for the question and a roll call vote.
We only had one more person who wanted to speak, so would you mind if we hear from them? Sorry, who was it? Mr. McGuire?
It's not that big question. On this discussion about, and I think whether we have money to do these raises or not is important, but we have a situation where who we give raises to changes every couple of years, and if those people are the ones that are unlucky enough to be in those low budget years, they're constantly going to get hit with less money. I mean, just to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Anybody else on this issue? Okay, I'm going to speak last, and then I'll also call for a roll call. I'm going to vote against this amendment. I haven't heard the case for singling out the recorder. And I also want to make the point, these people are elected officials, but they're also employees, and they're employees of the county who we expect to work with us to help control costs. These people are spending budgets that are vast in comparison to their salaries. I think it's important that we continue to have qualified employees in these positions. I frankly don't really understand the logic for not treating them like other county employees. These positions have had a 0% raise for the last 4 years, which no one else in the county has. So it's very difficult for me to I feel it verges on micromanagement. We get to specifically set these employees' salaries by statute, but in addition to being elected officials, they are employees. So for a number of reasons, including that, I'll not be supporting the amendment. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Petrie?
No.
Quisenberry? Yes. Rector?
Yes.
Rosales?
No.
Schrader? No. Schwartz? Shore?
No.
Weibel? Anderson? No. Bergson? No. Coert? No. Esri?
No.
Harper? No. Harrison? No. Hartke?
No.
Jay? Yes. Maxwell? No. McGuire? No. Michaels? No. Mitchell? No. Alex?
No, I've got 5 yeses to 16 noes. That amendment fails. And we are back to the main motion, which was a 2% raise across the board for these positions. At this, well, that's not the original recommendation, but that could certainly be one. At this point, we'll be open to discussion of the main motion or amendments thereto. I think I saw Mr. Quisenberry's hand first.
Yeah, and I'm just going to make a comment. I think we need to proceed. So I will consider other amendments, but I think I'm going to go ahead with the recommendation if there's no alternative. I will add that in an ideal world, these salaries would be set in a similar fashion that we set unrepresented employees on our annual basis based on the terms of the finances of that particular year. But this is an imperfect world in many ways, and the issue of a certain group getting affected every 2 years in a different way is always going to be true. We can't let the unfairness of that affect us making the decision that we think is the best decision at this point in this time. We can't always look at what we did 2 years ago and say, oh, we have to do that because we did that 2 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry. Any further discussion? Anyone want to make an amendment? Mr. Maxwell.
I'd like to propose the following amendment. We would not cut the recorder's salary, and instead we would treat all 4 of these alike. Circuit clerk, the recorder, the coroner, and the auditor. I would propose that the first 2 years, each of the first 2 years, a 2% raise, and the last 2 years, a 0% raise.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Does anybody want to second that, first of all, before there's any discussion? Mr. Weibel seconds that. First of all, was the motion clear to everybody? Mr. Harper.
Are you leaving the county board chair at 0?
Mr. Maxwell?
That would be my intent.
0, 0, 0, 0, 0 for the county board chair and 2200. Oh, sorry, the county board chair is only 2 years. 0, 0 for the county board chair and 2200 for the other positions?
That's correct.
Okay. Anybody want to speak to that? Mrs. Schwartz.
I'm just curious why 2200? I mean, right now we can't afford anything, so, and you have no idea what's happening 3 years from now, so maybe you can explain that?
The 22 does address the concern that we have for our employees, as the fact they have been doing an admirable job. The other is that it maintains equity that we've placed quite a bit of consideration on the last several years through the next 2 years. And at that point in time, we could continue equity by adjusting those salaries of the, at that time it'll be the county clerk, the sheriff, and the treasurer, I believe. So it would still maintain equity. It gives these employees some consideration, but also it is a compromise, and it does kind of hold our costs down.
I'm going to ask Deb to speak to that briefly, to the issue of equity, because I want to make sure board members understand what Mr. Maxwell is referring to, and then we'll go to you, Mr. Rector.
So right now, based on the history of all of the elected positions, we have equity between the two groups where one group of jobs is viewed to be slightly larger than the other group of jobs. The larger jobs are considered to be that of the county clerk, treasurer, and circuit clerk, and the smaller group are the auditor, coroner, and recorder. That equity exists right now, and the 3 who you are not designating their salaries right now, but you will in 2018, are receiving 2% next year and the year after. So if you do the first 2 years of 2% for this group right now, for 2017 and 2018, that equity is maintained until 2018. And you're then in a position, if the financial situation is still difficult, to set the 3 that you set in 2018 at 0 for the first 2 years to keep the whole salary base lower, but still maintain the equity between the groups of positions that you have in your electeds.
Well, in fact, to take that a little further, if that's the argument, then we would essentially be, I don't want to say committed to, but we would have to assume that the plan was to give 0 to that other group for the first 2 years, because otherwise we don't maintain equity with this group, right? Okay, thanks. Mr. Rector.
Yeah, I'd love to give everybody 5 or 10% raises, but I mean, we're not going to be able to do that. Cost of living hasn't even gone up 2% this year. Without knowing where we're going to find the money for facilities, and when we sit there and look at all the financial needs for facilities, I think it's fiscally irresponsible to give these people a raise. I agree with Mr. Weibel. These are great jobs. I know they're great people, but when we have to find money to take care of facilities and other needs, I don't think we need to be giving any raises. I don't think these people are going to run away. It's still a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Rector. Anybody else? Mr. Maxwell?
2% over the 2 years for these 4 employees would run about $14,000.
I don't know if Deb ran that scenario.
I thought it was 55. Oh, no, that was 40.
No, yeah, 2%. Do you have any idea what the number is?
I think Mr. Maxwell's pretty close. I mean, the difference between.
We think that's what we think. We think it's less than 15,000, so we'll say you're right. Anybody else on the current proposal?
I'd ask for a roll call.
Me too. We'll have a roll call. If nobody else wants to comment, I guess I'll speak. I guess I will support this. Based on the fact, I agree with Mr. Rector, 2% is higher than we're giving to the non-bargaining unit employees in the county, but these people have gotten 4 years of 0, so they will have ended up getting 2% raises over the course of 8 years, which is significantly less still than anybody else in the county's gotten. So I can live with this. Nobody wants to get the last word. Let's call the roll.
Petrie,
Yes.
Quisenberry,
Yes.
Rector, Rosales, Schrader, Schwartz, Shore, Weibel, Anderson, and Berkson, Coert, Esri,
Yes.
Harper,
No.
Harrison, Hartke,
No.
Jay, Maxwell,
Yes.
McGuire, Michaels, Mitchell, Alex.
14-6, that motion carries. That amends the main motion, so we are now back to the main motion, which is now essentially exactly the amendment that we just voted on. 2% raises for the first 2 years for everybody but the county board chair, and 0% raises in the third and fourth year for everybody but the county board, everybody, not including the county board chair. Any discussion on the main motion? Mr. Weibel?
Roll call vote, please.
If you wish, sure. Okay, let's vote on that again. Mr. Harper?
Main motion is just what we talked about, right?
Yeah, this is basically voting again on what we just voted on. Any additional discussion or comments? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Petrie,
Yes.
Quisenberry,
Yes.
Rector, Rosales, Schrader, Schwartz, Shore, Weibel? Anderson? Bergson? Esri?
Yes.
Harper? Harrison? Hartke?
No.
Jay? Maxwell?
Yes.
McGuire? Michaels? Mitchell? Alex?
Yes, we get the same answer?
No, we have one more vote with Peralta.
Okay, we have 19 to 6.
Oh.
No, sorry, 14 to 6. 14 to 6?
It's still 19. 14.
14 to 6. 14 to 6, the motion carries. Thank you for putting up with my bad math. The next item on the agenda is the resolution for the abatement and reduction of taxes heretofore levied for the payment of bonds. This is included in the packet and essentially reduces property tax by the amount required to account for bonds which are backed by property tax but being paid for by other sources of funds, such as sales tax. May I have a motion to send this to the full board with a recommendation for approval? Mr. Weibel, may I have a second? Ms. Bergson. Any discussion on this? Questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Finally, should I say finally, is that the last item? No, it's not. Next, I would request approval of RFP 2016-001 for financial auditing services for Champaign County. May I have a motion to release this RFP? Mr. Weibel and Ms. Michaels. Ms. Busey, do you have anything to contribute? This is for the preparation of the consolidated annual financial report, which has been done by the same auditor for 5 or 6 years,
yeah.
right? We extended by a year to cover the
Right.
fiscal year transition.
Right, and all you're doing is approving the release of the RFP, and the evaluation process is defined in the RFP. We're using basically the same system that we used 6 years ago.
And this, if approved here, would be released immediately. This does not have to go to the full board. It would be released by the Finance Committee. It would lead to a selection process. A final recommendation would be brought for a contract, would come to the full board, or comes back to Cal? What's your plan? So we'll bring to next month's Cal meeting.
No, we
When are
won't
gonna
have
bring it?
responses and results. I think it comes in April.
Okay, so the April Cal, we'll hear the recommendation for selection. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And we will move on to the recommendation for award of contract for broker services and for broker services for employee health insurance and related benefits pursuant to RFQ 2015-11. I am going to ask for a motion to send the County Administrator's recommendation to the full board with a recommendation for approval. Mr. Rosales and Mr. Rector, and I would like to ask Deb to speak to how we got here and what has happened recently.
There is a report in your yellow packet this evening. We issued the RFQ on December 14th. On January 19th, we received 6 responses. The evaluation team did an initial review and evaluation of those responses and shortlisted 4 terms, four respondents for presentations and interviews with the evaluation team. Those 4 firms were American Central Insurance Services, Barham Benefit Group, Diamond Brothers Insurance, and Arthur J. Gallagher and Company. We met with those firms last Tuesday and Thursday, and after those interviews were conducted, the evaluation team reviewed and came to an agreement to recommend Gallagher as the top-ranked firm, with some negotiation to be done with regard to their agreement. We added some additional terms from the RFQ with regard to the administrative services that they will provide on a daily basis, and we cut their initial fee proposal from $55,000 to $50,000 for the first 2 years of the agreement. Gallagher agreed to those terms, so the contract that you have before you this evening reflects that agreement, which is for an initial 2-year contract with 3 one-year automatic extensions unless canceled by the county for the services as we had defined in the RFQ and as are documented in the agreement that you have.
Deb, if I can ask, when you say automatic extensions, will this be brought, you won't be bringing it, but will your intent be that future county administrator will bring this to the county board for approval each year, or? will that be essentially the county administrator who will be expected to request that the county board terminate that?
The way this is written, it would not come to the county board, and it would rely on the county administrator. And you can certainly give direction to change that if you want to. The way it's written, thereafter, the consulting period will automatically extend for additional one-year periods. In that same clause, though, we have the ability to cancel this contract at any time with no reason with 30 days' notice. So the intent would be that we would let them know probably at least 90 days beforehand that we were going to cancel, because we would be doing another RFP process in order to engage a different consultant. So that's how this agreement is written. If that's acceptable to you, that's how we will proceed. But
And well, I think that's reasonable. It's probably something that we should have the Labor Management Health Insurance Committee consider as an annual issue.
after this is automatic 2 years,
Sure,
but you're right.
but after that, they should probably review
They
that.
should be evaluating probably 4 to 5 months ahead of time, at the end of the renewal process in October probably, whether or not this contract should be renewed. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Quisenberry?
Yeah, I think I would like a little bit more information, no more than you feel comfortable giving, on how the finalist was selected after the individual interviews. Was it a point system? Whatever details you're comfortable giving me.
We did have an evaluation form that was filled out by each of the evaluators, and based on points, Gallagher was the top-ranked firm. However, we didn't rely exclusively on that. We also had quite a bit of discussion about the various pros and cons of the basically 3 top firms, which is what led us to knowing that we wanted to negotiate with Gallagher for some additional commitments about services before proceeding with them. And if they had not agreed, then we probably would have gone on to the second one.
Okay, and was it close? Were there competitive firms, or was Gallagher far and away the?
Second and third were very close. Gallagher was pretty much a leader, a strong leader.
Okay, one thing I would ask, I guess I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the idea that years 3, 4, and 5 could be renewed without some kind of check in with the county board. So I'd like to figure out what we could do about that. The other thing I'd like to figure out, I guess we don't have all of the information here, right? We just have the consulting agreement. There's an appendix that we don't have, the services list. Exhibit A, I guess.
Page 6 of
Okay.
It's on the list.
All right. I guess one of the things, I guess after 2 years, I do want some kind of check-in with the board before we renew it. And what I would like is a kind of an objective review of the scope of services to see if Gallagher is delivering on all of the things they've committed to in this circumstance.
I agree with that, and I am thinking that probably the best venue for that would start with the Labor Management Health Insurance Committee, because we've got recommendations from we've got representation from both, many employees whose benefits they're handling, so we can get a feel for the day-to-day handling. Also, the benefits administrators on that committee and the county administrators on that committee. So that should be a good source of information. I would agree that I think it would make sense for this to be, the consulting agreement or the agreement does not bar the county board from talking about this. I don't see why this wouldn't be an issue where the Labor Management Health Insurance Committee would make an annual recommendation to the county board to continue it. I don't know, you're shaking your head. I'm not sure what transpired in these negotiations, but I think it's worth an annual discussion.
This is their language, which I said I would bring to you. But pointing this out, the last contract made it clear, the board approved it every year. So if you want that language back in, all you have to do is tell me that, and we will put it back in.
Yeah, I think
Does anybody not think we should do that? Do that.
That's fine.
Ms. Petrie?
If I remember correctly, Ms. Bergson serves on this committee. Do you have any?
Yeah, Mr. Harper and myself.
Oh, okay. Do the 3 county board members who served on that committee have any additional comments or advice for us on doing this? Should we defer it so we can get that correction in here and have a chance to read it, or is there a time framework?
I think all that will change is it'll say we'll, instead
Okay.
of automatically extended, it will be able to be extended at the county board's option by
Okay.
additional
Yeah,
periods.
And I believe Gallagher said, I mean, if we're not happy with them, we can fire them in 30 days' notice.
Which is in the
which will never
contract,
get done.
which is in the contract anyway. Ms. Bergson, did you have anything to add about the process?
County board members on the committee, I think they could come back to the board if there were a problem. I don't see why the board should consider it every year. It's got enough to do, that's all.
All right, I don't really see the harm. Any other discussion on this? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have one vote in opposition. Last item on the agenda is the Job Content Evaluation Committee recommendations. The first for the Master Control Officer. This is the finance end of what we heard earlier. This is what officially amends the schedule of authorized positions. May I have a motion to send the recommendation for the Master Control Officer to the full board with a recommendation for approval? Mr. Anderson's waving his hand. Anybody second? Ms. Bergson. Any additional discussion on this beyond what we already had? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. And finally, the Job Content Evaluation Committee recommendation for the GIS specialist. May I have a motion to send this to the full board with a recommendation for approval? Mr. Shore and Mr. Quisenberry. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. That motion carries. Items for consent. No, it's certainly not. Items for consent are D 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. E4. E5 is done. And E not 6 and E7, A and B. So not E6, not E5 because it takes effect immediately and doesn't go to the full board, and not E3, but everything else. That concludes finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alex. Any other business that wants to be brought up? Yes, Mr. Quisenberry.
I move the approval of the closed session minutes that we have reviewed tonight.
Right. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong section. A second, Mr. Esri. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Okay, one last thing. There's an opening in February. If somebody wants to step up to do the reading at the county board meeting next week, just send me an email message and let me know. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Mr. Shore, Mr. Quisenberry, thank you very much. Have a good evening.